Again, we return to Words of the Master. This is a series, 103, and this is part one of that series. We'll have some up-and-coming series coming up, so we want you to stay with us. We're talking about the powers of reconciliation. Powers of reconciliation. Let's get our pen going here, and we're going to use a felt tip as we usually do, and we're going to make our point. Powers of reconciliation. We've already given you the text for this message, and we're going to move on to the three powers of reconciliation. The text came again from, we want you to read it when you get a chance, 5:23 through 24. Three powers of reconciliation we talked about last time in our lesson. That was part one. It's already on YouTube. The powers of remembrance, the powers of forgiveness, and the powers of unconditional love. These are three powers that we want to recommend to you. Remembering those that you've hurt or harmed, forgiving them through unconditional love. Let's move on now and take a look at how all this came into being. Everything began and ended in the Old Testament with the law that Moses brought. Now remember, Abraham was promised that he would be the seed, and that the seed would come, which is Jesus Christ, but he was promised that he would be the father of all nations, father of kingdoms, fathers of different worlds that were to come. But it was 430 years following Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and those old patriarchs that Moses came on the scene. And when Moses came on the scene, the first thing he did was to civilize society. Civilize society. We can see it right here. Civilize society. That was very, very important in the beginning. Because love cannot exist, and this word is exist, E-X-I-S-T. Love cannot exist in the jungle. In prehistoric days, when there was an eye for an eye and really an eye for an eye, when people literally went around and took what they wanted, it was a very scary place the world was to live, and there was no laws whatsoever. And then Moses came along and he gave the Ten Commandments. Let's get another color for this pen so that we can actually see. Let's try what blue would do here. Yes, that's better. Moses civilized the society, and he brought us the Ten Commandments. Everyone remembers the great movie, The Ten Commandments, and how that became the foundation for law. Foundation for all law was the Ten Commandments, 1 through 10, beginning with loving the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy body. You remember those. But law had some problems, because law depends on greed, fear, retribution, and punishment. We don't obey the law because it's the right thing to do. We would like to think that that's why we obey the law, but we really don't. We obey the law primarily because of fear, because of retribution. Most individuals who obey the law obey it for that reason. Now, you probably say to me, well, you know, that's not necessarily the reason I do it. But law brought to the world order. It also brought discipline, and along with the law. And that was very, very important. And because it brought these things, it made love possible. Love can happen if there is some kind of environment where love can grow, love can prosper. And out of our sense of law, out of the sense of law came the notion of justice. And it's more than a notion, because in every state, as you know, there are codes, books, even state laws, and then we're talking in the United States now, but all over the world. Every country that's civilized have some laws. So the question became, what is justice? And in the Old Testament, In the Old Testament, let's put it here, OT, for Old Testament, justice was an eye for an eye, and I'm sure you've heard this, tooth for a tooth. And because there was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that was kind of considered okay back in the day. And even to this day, many people believe in capital punishment, that if you kill somebody, you deserve to be killed. And most of the laws are based on the old Mosaic law. But to a great extent, these laws are crude, still hard, and they're violent. It's better than lawlessness, of course. It's better than no laws at all. But law is relative. It depends on evil for its foundation. And anything that depends on wrongdoing for its foundation can include the kinds of things that that Jesus brought into being, which was love. And we're going to talk about that in great detail in our next video. But right now, we're trying to establish where did this law come from? Where did the law? Now remember, it was a big deal as we go back and look at our scripture. If you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar and go to be reconciled with your brother. Now this was Jesus talking, and this was and he was talking many years as the seed of Abraham. Jesus was the seed of Abraham, and a lot of you might want to explore that as you take a look at how we became heirs to the promises of Abraham. But it was 430 years later that the Ten Commandments came into being, and then following Moses, and following David, and the whole trials and tribulations of the Israelites and what they'd gone through, and how David begat Solomon, and so forth and so on, leading to Joseph and the baby Jesus, and Mary, and then we come into Jesus Christ. We're going to talk about that. But getting back to the civilization of society, these laws were very important. And as you know, the Israelites had to fight a lot of individuals, a lot of people during that period of time in order to establish civilization or establish a society. And even predating the Mosaic law, there was a huge Roman Empire. As you know, the Roman Empire conquered large portions of the world, almost the entire world, and it really was a warring class, and the law was the sword, and the emperor or the kings of that day controlled everything, and everything was broken down into classes. You can certainly review and study rise and fall of the Roman civilization, but it was not exactly a lawless society. There was a Greek and Roman state, but the Mosaic law, the laws of Moses, effectively changed the whole society of the world. These little simple 10 Commandments, although they were crude, although they were hard, although they in some cases were violent themselves, such as the stoning of a woman who had committed adultery, and a lot of other things that were attributed to that day, you can still see how without the law, the world was in bad shape, and with the law, there was a certain civilization, but it did not bring us love. It did not bring us the new day. Jesus Christ brought that. And that's the balance that you're going to see between the law and love. And the challenge that the disciples had in bringing forward Christianity in a world of Judaism. And you always saw the Judaizing Christians in many ways seeking to enforce this law even in the New Testament. And there are several books in the Bible you'll see where Paul in particular was fighting the battle against the law, circumcision and some of the other practices of the Jews. Even though a new religion had came on the scene, there was still the attempt to enforce the law. Again, the law is better, and even today it's better than lawlessness, because lawlessness is back to the jungle. However, if justice is based strictly on retribution, strictly on punishment, strictly on keeping people from hurting and harming one another, that's good to a certain extent, but it doesn't beget love. It doesn't give forth to love. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth eventually will make the whole world blind and toothless if it's allowed to reign. And if we use the same evil to a certain extent, we're talking about the acts themselves, and we use that same evil to fight evil, then where is love? Where does love come into the picture? But again, law made it possible. Love cannot exist in a jungle. Love has to grow from law. And so Moses did a good thing by bringing the law into being. We'll talk more again in our next video about love in comparison to where we are. We're moving then from the Old Testament to the New Testament, which gave forth the idea of reconciliation and the possibility of forgiveness and the possibility of unconditional love, which is what Jesus certainly was all about.